The sound that came out of him didn't belong in a five-star restaurant. It was raw, guttural. A sound that made every fork stop midair and every conversation die instantly. Kwon Jaehan, the most feared man in Seoul's underground, was gripping the edge of the dining table with both hands, his knuckles white, his face twisted in something the people around him had never seen before. Fear. "Help!" His voice cracked. His other hand flew to his chest, then his stomach. I've been poisoned." And then the table went over. Crystal glasses shattered. Plates of lobster and Wagyu beef crashed to the marble floor. $12,000 worth of food scattered across the restaurant like it was nothing. His two bodyguards lunged forward. His personal assistant was already on the phone. The three men sitting across from him, his business partners, men who never flinched at anything, were on their feet, faces pale. Nobody moved toward him. They all took a step back. Because this was Kwon Jaehan. And if someone had gotten close enough to poison Kwon Jaehan, then whoever did it might still be in this room. And nobody wanted to be the next person standing too close to him. He was on his knees now, both hands pressing into his abdomen, his jaw locked tight, fighting the pain like he could will it away through sheer dominance. His breathing was fast, shallow, loud. "Call an ambulance," one of his men barked. "No!" Jaehan's voice came out sharp even through the pain. "No ambulance." "Sir." I said no. He didn't trust hospitals. He'd made too many enemies in too many places. A hospital meant exposure. It meant vulnerability. It meant lying in a bed while someone found out exactly which room he was in and exactly which floor. His left hand gripped his stomach harder. The pain was spreading now, crawling up his ribs like something alive. The entire restaurant had gone completely still. 43 guests, 8 waitstaff. 2 chefs who had crept to the kitchen door to see what the noise was. All of them frozen. All of them watching the most powerful man in the room slowly fold in on himself. And then one person moved. She wasn't supposed to. She was nobody. She was Station 3. The section near the window. The one that handled table 12 and the 2 smaller tables on the left side of the room. She had been refilling a water glass when the table went over. She had watched the whole thing from 8 feet away. But she moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just quietly, purposefully, like something in her body had already made the decision before her mind caught up. She walked straight through the chaos, past the broken glass, past the bodyguards, past the frozen guests, and crouched down in front of Kwon Jaehan. He looked up at her. She was young, maybe 26, 27, with dark brown skin and natural hair pinned back under the restaurant's uniform cap. Her eyes were steady, calm in a way that almost felt strange given everything that was happening around them. "Let me see your face," she said quietly. He blinked. Nobody spoke to him like that. Not staff, not strangers, not people who didn't know who he was. And she clearly had no idea who he was. "I'm fine," he said through his teeth. "You're not fine. You're sweating through a $3,000 jacket and you can barely breathe." She leaned in slightly, studying his face. "How long ago did you eat the food?" One of the bodyguards stepped forward. "Ma'am, step back. I'm trying to help him." She didn't even look at the bodyguard. Her eyes stayed on Jaehan. "The color in your lips? It's wrong. And the way you're holding your stomach, it's not your heart. Something you ate." A pause. "Or something in the drink." Jaehan stared at her. Behind his eyes, something was calculating even through the pain. Who was this woman? Why wasn't she scared? Why were her hands steady? "Are you a doctor?" he managed. "No." She stood up. "But I have something that might help. Give me 2 minutes." She turned and walked toward the kitchen before anyone could say anything. The head bodyguard looked at Jaehan. Jaehan gave the smallest nod. Nobody stopped her. Her name was Damilola. Damilola Adeyemi, 26 years old. From Lagos originally, raised partly in Ibadan. Now 3 years in Seoul and still figuring out how to feel about it. She had come here chasing a scholarship that almost worked out. Then a linguistics graduate program that didn't quite work out. Then a restaurant job at Aria Seoul. High-end, good tips on a good night, brutal on the feet, and the kind of place where she had learned very quickly to be invisible. She was good at invisible. She moved through the kitchen fast, past the sous chef who tried to ask her what was happening, past the plating station to her locker in the staff room at the back. She knew exactly what she was looking for. Her grandmother had given it to her before she left Nigeria. A small, dark bottle, thick glass, sealed with a cork wrapped in red string. The label was handwritten in Yoruba, and the liquid inside was the color of dark tea. For when your body needs to fight, her grandmother had said. For when something enters that shouldn't be there. Damilola had never used it. She had carried it for 3 years the same way she carried the photograph of her mother. Not because she needed it every day, but because leaving it behind felt wrong. She grabbed the bottle. She was back at his side in under 2 minutes. Jaehan was still on the floor. He had refused to let them move him to the seat. His assistant was in the corner speaking in rapid Korean on 2 phones at once. His bodyguards stood in a loose half-circle, scanning every face in the restaurant. 2 of the kitchen staff had been quietly prevented from leaving. Damilola crouched in front of him again. "This is going to taste like the worst thing you've ever put in your mouth," she said, pulling the cork out. "But you need to drink it. All of it. Don't stop." He looked at the bottle, then at her. "What is it?" "My grandmother's remedy. She was a healer back home. I know that sounds... How do I know you're not the one who poisoned me?" The question landed flat. Direct. His eyes were sharp even in pain, scanning her face for the lie. She met his gaze without blinking. "You don't," she said simply. "But you're already in trouble. And whatever your men are calling right now, it'll take 20 minutes to get here. You don't have 20 minutes. She held out the bottle. "So, your choice." A long second passed, and then Kwon Jaehan, the man who had never trusted anyone in 15 years, reached out and took the bottle. He drank it. All of it. The grimace that crossed his face was almost comical. His whole body shuddered. One of his bodyguards looked genuinely alarmed, but he didn't stop. And when the last drop was gone, he handed the empty bottle back to her and said nothing. Damilola sat back on her heels. She watched him. The restaurant was still silent. 43 people holding their breath. About 90 seconds passed. Then Jaehan's hand slowly loosened from his stomach. His breathing began to even out. The rigid line of his shoulders dropped slightly. He pressed one hand flat against the floor and pushed himself upright, sitting back against the overturned table. He exhaled. A long, slow exhale that carried something enormous in it. "It's working," he said. More to himself than to her, like he couldn't quite believe it. Damilola nodded once. "Give it 5 more minutes before you try to stand." He turned to look at her. Really look at her. For the first time, without the fog of pain making everything blurry around the edges. "What's your name?" he asked. "Damilola." He repeated it quietly under his breath, like he was testing the shape of it. "Korean name?" "Nigerian." Something moved in his expression. Not warmth exactly, more like a door opening a crack. "You're not from here." "No." "But you stayed." She almost smiled. "I'm still deciding. If this is hitting you, stay with me, because this is where things start to get complicated." His name, she found out later, meant nothing to her at the time. The other staff knew. She could see it in the way the manager materialized at Jaehan's shoulder the moment the danger had passed. pale-faced and apologies falling out of his mouth like rain. She could see it in the way the other guests were quietly, professionally moved toward the exit. She could see it in the way 2 black SUVs appeared outside the front entrance within 7 minutes, without anyone appearing to call them. But Damilola had missed all of the dinner conversation that would have told her who this man was. She had been covering for Minji, who was sick, running 3 tables solo, and the only table she hadn't been watching when the food was served to his party was his. She finished her shift. She was changing out of her uniform in the staff room when the manager knocked on the door. "He wants to see you before he leaves." She blinked. "Who?" The manager looked at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read. "The gentleman from table 7. She pulled her jacket on and followed him out. Jaehan was standing near the window at the front of the restaurant. His suit jacket was back on, straightened. Not a single thing about his appearance suggesting he had been on the floor 20 minutes ago. His 2 bodyguards stood at a respectful distance. His assistant hovered slightly further back. He was looking out at the street. When Damilola appeared, he turned. "You're leaving," he said. "My shift ended. Sit down." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not on the clock anymore." Something almost imperceptible flickered across his face, like he had just heard something he wasn't expecting. "I want to thank you." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." His voice was measured, controlled. Not cold, just careful. Like every word was placed exactly where he wanted it. "I want to." She sat down. He sat across from her. The table between them was one of the small ones by the window. Without the crowd, without the crisis, the silence between them felt different. Less urgent. More like something that hadn't decided what it was yet. "The bottle," he said. "Your grandmother gave it to you." "Before I left Nigeria, yes." "How did you know it would work?" "I didn't." She folded her hands on the table. "But I knew what it was made from. Bitter cola, African pepper, neem extract, things that pull toxins. My grandmother used it for everything from bad food to snake interactions." She paused. "Whoever got to you used something fast-acting but not lethal. At least not immediately. The herb would have given your body enough to fight back while the natural process caught up." He was quiet for a moment. "You know a lot about this." "She taught me. I didn't want to learn at the time." A small, private smile. "I was 15 and more interested in television." He almost smiled back. Almost. "You could have walked away," he said. "Most people did." "I know. Why didn't you?" She thought about it. Genuinely thought about it, which he could see. "Because you were scared," she said finally. "And people don't usually let themselves look like that in public. It seemed like you needed someone to just move." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table. Thick, white. His name wasn't on it, but the quality of the paper said everything. "For what you did tonight." She looked at the envelope. Didn't touch it. "I didn't do it for money." "I know that too." He didn't move the envelope. "Take it anyway." "Mr." She realized she still didn't know his name. "Kwon," he said. "Kwon Jaehan." The name still meant nothing to her. He could see that. And for reasons he wouldn't be able to explain later, something about that settled comfortably in his chest. She picked up the envelope, put it in her bag without opening it. Stood up. "Get some rest, Mr. Kwon," she said, "and drink a lot of water tonight. The herbs pull hard." He watched her leave, and for the first time in a long time, Kwon Jaehan sat alone in a room and didn't think about the meeting he'd missed, or the men who had tried to poison him, or the enemy he now needed to identify. He thought about the way she had crouched in front of him without fear, the way she had said "your choice," and meant it. He didn't know what to do with that. She opened the envelope on the subway. There was no note inside. No card. Just cash. In one. A denomination she didn't immediately understand until she fanned it out and then counted again, and sat back against the seat with her hand over her mouth. It was more than she made in 4 months. She stared at the ceiling of the subway car all the way to her stop. She didn't expect to see him again. That was the reasonable assumption. Rich, powerful man, dramatic evening, generous tip. End of story. Seoul was enormous. Her world was small. Her apartment near Mangwon, her shifts at Aria, her weekly video call with her mother, her Thursday evening Korean class that she kept telling herself she would stop attending and never did. But 3 days later, he walked back into the restaurant. Alone this time. No entourage, no bodyguards visible, though she suspected they were somewhere close. He was dressed down. Still expensive, still precise, but no jacket. Just a dark shirt and trousers that probably cost more than her rent. He sat in her section. Damilola saw him the moment he walked in. She finished taking the order at table 9, excused herself, and walked over. Mr. Kwon. Damilola. He said her name like he'd been practicing it. Not perfectly. The rhythm was slightly wrong, but the effort was clear. Are you here for dinner? I am. She handed him the menu. He didn't open it. Is this your regular table? She asked. No. I specifically requested this section. She looked at him. He looked back. I'll give you a few minutes, she said. She came back 4 minutes later. He ordered simply. The sea base. No starter. Water with no ice. She wrote it down without fuss. How are you feeling? She asked as she clicked her pen closed. Better. A pause. Because of you. Because of my grandmother. Because of you, he said again, quietly but firm. She felt something she didn't expect to feel. Not quite discomfort. Not exactly warmth either. Something in between that she didn't have a name for yet. She went to put his order in. He came back the following week, then the week after that. Always the same section. Always simple orders. Always a conversation that lasted exactly as long as the natural rhythm of service allowed. Never longer, never shorter. He was not a man who flirted. She noticed that. He didn't smile easily. He didn't lean in. He didn't use the kind of language that men used when they were performing interest. He just talked to her, asked questions, and listened to the answers with the full weight of his attention. He asked about Lagos. She told him about the heat of it, the noise, the way her mother's compound smelled like pounded yam on Sundays. He asked about the scholarship. She told him about the application, the near miss, the pivot to the linguistics program, the pivot again to just staying. Because she had started to love the city even when the city didn't always love her back. He listened to all of it without once making her feel like her story was less than. You stayed even when it was hard, he said one evening. Most things worth having are hard to get to. He nodded slowly, like that landed somewhere specific inside him. She began to look forward to Thursdays. She didn't let herself think too carefully about why. The call came on a Tuesday. She was on her break, outside the back of the restaurant, eating the rice she'd packed from home because the staff meal had been underwhelming. Her phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize, Korean digits, not a contact. She almost ignored it. Damilola. She knew his voice immediately, low, controlled. But something underneath it tonight that was different from the restaurant version of him. Mr. Kwon, how did you get this number? I asked the manager. A pause. I should have asked you first. I'm sorry. She blinked. This man had just apologized. She processed that. Is something wrong? She asked. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, even if the answer is no. Okay. The restaurant told me you're not rostered this Thursday. I switched with someone. I know. I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere else. Not as a customer. Another pause. If that's something you'd consider. The evening traffic hummed in the street beyond the alley. Somewhere nearby, someone was frying something that smelled like garlic and sesame. Dinner, she repeated. Yes. As in a date. Yes. Flat. No performance. Just yes. She looked up at the strip of sky visible between the buildings above her. I'll think about it, she said. That's fair. She almost smiled. How will I reach you? He gave her a number. She saved it. She sat with it for 2 days. She called her best friend Taiwo in Lagos, who shrieked so loudly Damilola had to hold the phone away from her ear. A Korean man? A rich Korean man, who you literally saved from death. Dami, this is a film. I don't even know that much about him. What do you need to know? He's clearly not the type to chase women. He asked properly. He waited. He apologized for getting your number without asking. That's rare. There's something he's not telling me about himself. There's something everyone doesn't tell you at the start. That's just called Tuesday, go. She texted him on Wednesday night. I'll go. He replied within 30 seconds. I'll pick you up at 7. She almost canceled twice. Not because she didn't want to go, but because the morning before she'd finally done what she probably should have done weeks ago. She'd typed his name into a search engine. Kwon Jaehan. The results loaded in under a second. She sat on her bedroom floor for a long time after that. He arrived at 7 exactly. She was ready, but she made him wait 3 minutes because she needed those 3 minutes to look at herself in the mirror and decide who she was going to be in this conversation. The restaurant he took her to was the kind of quiet that only money could buy. No other diners within earshot. A view over the Han River. Soft light. No menu. Just a chef who came out and talked them through what he'd prepared. She was quiet through the first course. He noticed. You found something, he said. She looked up. Online? Your energy is different. She set down her fork. You're in organized crime. Silence. The articles called it business investment and property development, she said. But the other results were less careful with their words. He was very still. Not defensive. Not afraid. Just still. Yes, he said. So when you said business partners, those men at the table, they are business partners. The nature of the business is complicated. It's dangerous. Yes. She looked at him. He looked back. Why are you telling me the truth? She asked. Because you asked. Most people don't ask. Most people already know and pretend they don't. He turned his water glass slowly. You're not from this world. You had no reason to pretend, so I'm not going to insult you by doing the same. She was quiet for a long time. The poisoning, she said finally. Someone tried to kill you. Yes. Do you know who? We have a strong idea. Is it over? Something passed across his face. Complex, worn. It's never over. Not completely. She absorbed that. Why did you come back to the restaurant? She asked. After everything that happened? Why me specifically? He didn't answer right away. He looked out at the river, and for a moment she saw something she hadn't seen in him before. Not weakness exactly, but tiredness. The kind that lives so deep in a person that it only surfaces when they think no one is watching. Because you weren't afraid of me? He said quietly, and I hadn't realized how much I missed that. Stay with me, because this is the part that changes everything. 3 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. She sat on the edge of her bathroom sink for 40 minutes with the test in her hand, not moving. It was impossible. The timing was impossible. She and Jaehan had kissed exactly once. Goodnight at the end of their second dinner, brief and careful, and both of them surprised by it. Nothing more. The math didn't work. She was 8 weeks along. 8 weeks ago, she hadn't even known Kwon Jaehan existed. 8 weeks ago, she had still been in something she had been trying to leave. A relationship with a man named Seong Min, a graduate student. Kind at first, then less kind, then sharp in ways she had stopped making excuses for. She had left him 6 weeks ago. She had blocked his number. She had not thought about that night in her apartment 3 weeks before she left, when things had gone differently than she wanted, and she had told herself it was complicated and hadn't let herself think about it since. She thought about it now. She sat on the edge of the sink for a very long time. She told Jaehan. Not because she had to. She knew she didn't have to. But she had been raised by a woman who believed that silence only protected the wrong person, and she was carrying something that would eventually become impossible to hide, and she had already decided that she was keeping it. She told him over the phone because she didn't trust herself to say it without crying if she could see his face. The silence on his end lasted about 15 seconds. "Are you safe?" he asked. "Not is it mine. Not are you sure? Are you safe?" She exhaled. "Yes." "The man before?" "Yes." Another silence. "Does he know?" "No. And he won't. If he becomes a problem, he won't." She said it sharply, then softer. "I just needed you to know. You don't owe me anything. I'm not asking for anything, I just... Damilola." "What?" "Stop talking." She stopped. "I'm coming over," he said. "You don't have to." "I know." He was at her apartment in 25 minutes. He brought food from a place near her neighborhood that she'd mentioned once, casually, in passing. She couldn't even remember when. He had listened well enough to remember. He sat across from her at her small kitchen table while she ate. He didn't eat. He just sat, present, quiet, while she worked through the meal and the tears that came halfway through it and the long conversation that followed, about what she wanted, about what she was afraid of, about the life she'd been building in a city that wasn't hers and the one she hadn't planned on. He listened to all of it. At the end, he said, "Whatever you need, whatever form that takes, I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him across the small table. "You barely know me," she said. "I know enough. This isn't your responsibility. It became my concern the night you knelt in a restaurant and saved my life with a bottle your grandmother gave you." He folded his hands on the table. Steady. Certain. "I don't take that lightly." She looked down at her hands. "I'm scared," she said quietly. First time she'd said it out loud. "I know. I don't want to rely on someone and then lose them. I know. I don't want my child to grow up in something dangerous." The word landed between them. He was quiet. "I'm working on that," he said. "It's not finished yet. But I'm working on it." "What does that mean?" "It means the life I've been living. I've been trying to find a way out of it for 2 years. Slowly. Carefully." He paused. "It's not something I can announce, but it's something I can show you. If you'll let me." She looked at him for a long time. "Show me," she said finally. The next 4 months were not easy. They were honest, which was different from easy. They spent time together the way real people do, figuring out rhythms and friction and the small daily negotiations of two lives that have never overlapped before. She learned that he woke up before dawn and didn't know how to make eggs. He learned that she was unreachable before coffee and sang under her breath while she cooked. She learned that he had a sister in Busan he hadn't spoken to in 3 years, over a falling out he deeply regretted. He learned that she called her mother every Sunday without exception, and cried sometimes after hanging up and never fully explained why. She didn't pretend the danger wasn't there. She saw the bodyguards who were always somewhere close. She saw the occasional coded calls he stepped outside to take. She felt the weight of it. But she also saw what he'd told her he was doing. The slow, strategic unraveling of ties, the assets being moved, the legitimate business interests being expanded and pushed forward. He showed her documents. He introduced her to his lawyer, a careful, silver-haired woman who explained the process with unflinching detail. "It takes time," the lawyer said, "but it's happening." Damilola nodded. She was measuring something the whole time, not what he said, but whether what he did matched it. Mostly, it did. Then the name came back. Seongmin. She was 7 months pregnant and moving slowly, and she came home one evening to find her front door slightly open. She froze on the landing. Nothing was disturbed inside, nothing taken. But on her kitchen table, there was a photograph. Her, leaving Seoul. Her, getting into Jaehan's car 3 blocks from her apartment. Her, at the prenatal clinic she attended every 3 weeks. Someone had been watching her, and the photograph, the quality of it, the specific angle, she had seen angles like that before. In photographs on Seongmin's laptop years ago, photos she had seen without realizing what she was seeing. She called Jaehan. He was there in 18 minutes. He walked through the apartment. His face was controlled in the way it got when something was serious. Not cold, not angry, just locked down and processing. "He's been watching you," he said. "Since when?" "I don't know yet." "How did he even—" "It doesn't matter how. It stops now." "Jaehan." "It stops." He turned to look at her. The control in his face broke just slightly. "You're 7 months pregnant. You're not going to spend the last weeks of this being afraid in your own home." She moved in with him 2 days later. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself she would feel strange in his apartment. That huge, silent, expensive space that barely felt lived in. She told herself she would be out of place there. She wasn't. She brought her grandmother's photograph. Her books. The small wooden stool that had been her mother's and had traveled with her from Lagos to Seoul in a padded bag. She put it near the kitchen window, and it looked like it had always been there. She and Jaehan didn't discuss what any of it meant. They just moved through the days. Seongmin was handled. She didn't ask for details, and Jaehan didn't offer them. But one morning he told her quietly that the situation was resolved, that she wouldn't be watched anymore. "What does resolved mean?" she asked carefully. "He understands the consequences now," Jaehan said. "That's all." She looked at him. He held her gaze. "He's not hurt." No. She believed him. She didn't entirely understand why, but she did. The baby came 3 weeks early. It was 4 in the morning. Jaehan drove her himself, ignoring the bodyguard who offered to take the wheel. He kept one hand on hers the entire drive. At the hospital, they wouldn't let him in the delivery room at first. He sat outside in the corridor for 3 hours in a chair that was clearly too small for him, completely still, a posture that the nurses later said they'd never seen on a waiting father, like a man who was holding himself together by sheer force of will. She called his name once, from inside the room. He was through the door before the nurse could stop him. No one tried to stop him after that. The baby was a girl. She was small and loud, and her face was scrunched and red and perfect. Damilola held her against her chest and cried the kind of tears that don't come from sadness. They come from something bigger than sadness, something that doesn't have a name. Jaehan sat beside the bed. He didn't speak for a long time. He looked at the baby with an expression that Damilola had never seen on his face before. All of the control was gone, all of the careful, measured distance. He just looked like a man who had been handed something he hadn't known he was missing. "Can I—" he started. She handed the baby to him before he finished the sentence. He held her with a steadiness that surprised her and shouldn't have. His hands were large and careful. The baby blinked up at him with the unfocused gaze of someone who has just arrived in the world and is still deciding what to make of it. "She's not afraid of me either," he said quietly. Damilola laughed, a tired, wet, full laugh that filled the small hospital room. "What's her name?" he asked. She had thought about it for months. Gone back and forth. Nigerian names, Korean sounds, something that could travel between worlds the way she had. Adais, she said. It means daughter of the king in Igbo. She paused. And Jesu, because it means wisdom, and she's going to need a lot of it. He said both names once, slowly, holding the baby. Adais. Jesu. Good, he said. Like that was the only word required. 6 weeks later, Jaehan's lawyer called with news. The final asset transfer had cleared. The last formal tie had been severed. The business interests were now entirely legitimate. Property, tech investment, a foundation he had been quietly building for 2 years that worked with at-risk youth in 3 cities. He was out. He told Damilola that evening. She was feeding Adeze, the apartment soft with evening light, the small wooden stool from her mother's kitchen still at the window. It's done? She asked. It's done. She looked at him. How do you feel? She asked. He thought about it. Lighter? He said. I feel lighter. She looked down at the baby, then back up at him. My grandmother used to say that the herbs don't do the healing, the body does. The herbs just give it what it needs to fight. He was quiet. You needed something to fight for, she said simply. He crossed the room and sat beside her on the sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched. He looked at the baby. The baby looked at neither of them. She was deeply focused on the business of eating, which was the most important thing in her world right now. Thank you, he said. For what? For not walking away, at any of it. She thought about the night in the restaurant, the table going over, the sound he'd made, the way she'd moved before she'd thought about it. Some instinct older than logic pulling her across a room toward a stranger who needed someone to just move. You look like you needed help, she said. I did. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You still do sometimes, she said. So do I. That's just Tuesday? He said. She laughed. Taiwo had said that. She'd told him that story. He'd remembered. Yeah, she said. That's just Tuesday. Outside, Seoul hummed on. The night market a few streets over, the Han River dark and glittering, the city enormous and indifferent and full of people carrying stories that would never make the news. Inside, a Korean man who had spent 15 years being feared sat in the warm light of an apartment that finally felt like a home, holding a baby named for a daughter of kings, beside a woman from Lagos who had once crossed a room without thinking and changed both of their lives. The bottle was empty. It had done its job. The rest was theirs to build. If you made it to the end, share this one. Some stories find exactly the person who needs to hear them.